what was missing was, a clear, technical direction. I think that I'd always been a fan of Adrian and his cars, going way back to Leighton House times in the late 1980s. And Adrian was, the very best that's ever been in Formula One. It was a question of, how could we entice, how could we attract Adrian to join the Red Bull team? And that's where David Coulthard came into play, who was our driver at the time, and had obviously worked with Adrian for many years at both Williams and McLaren.
The opportunity now with Red Bull to join a team, but still very much a fledgling team, and to be involved with Christian on trying to grow that team with the aspiration to win races. I mean, kind of winning championships seemed a very distant dream at that point, but to try and win races was something that really intrigued me.
Sebastian worked incredibly hard. He was incredibly dedicated. He was often the last guy in the engineering office at the end of a Friday or Saturday. His debriefs, I mean, it took him half an hour to do the formation lap.
He was very methodical in his approach, and he drove himself hard. And if he made a mistake, then he would want to understand how he made that mistake, what he could do better, and he very rarely made the same mistake twice. So I think that dedication, and that played through into the team as well. So then the team were often prepared to put in that extra mile because they saw his work and commitment that he was prepared to put in. And that dedication helped us from an engineering side to make the car better.
I mean, Adrian is the only bloke that can see air. He lives in the Matrix. He's been the conductor of the technical orchestra for all these years now, and but he's still very hands-on. He's still at his drawing board. I think it's probably the only drawing board in Formula One. I had to argue with Ron Dennis to wrestle it out of McLaren. Obviously highs and lows during all these years, but it's always been fun. It's always been about the racing, and we've always had great support from the group and from Dietrich, from Helmut, and that's enabled us to go about our jobs and just focus on being the best race team that we can be.
The championships years of 10 to 13 were all with the Renault V8. We had a great relationship with the engineers at Renault. I think it's fair to say they didn't have the most powerful V8, but it was a product that they tailored to suit our car. We have some particular requirements, particularly in the way we used the exhaust, and they were bent over backwards to maximise what we needed from the engine. We then went into the hybrid era, and Renault in the first year, 2014, kind of interpreted the regulations as well as Mercedes. So we were quite a long way behind. And in the first year, you accept that. We all make mistakes. Chassis, engine, new regulations, you can get it right, you can get it wrong. They got it wrong. When the engine at the start of 15 seemed, if anything, actually worse than the 14 engine, that was a pretty disillusioning moment. And you then realise that in your foreseeable future, if you do a spectacular job, you might snatch the odd win here or there, but you're never going to win a championship. So that was a reset, which I think we all had to come to terms with, particularly after that period of kind of dominating the second half of 2009 and then the subsequent 4 championships, that this was not going to be our reality for the foreseeable future.
Well, you learn that where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and as Adrian says, during that period it was tough because we come off the back of 4 dominant championships, and suddenly this barren period, and another team was just light years ahead of everybody. And the most important thing was keeping the team together, focusing on the things that we could control, that we could influence, and bit by bit we were able to snatch wins, here and there in every season bar one. And it was always a question of, right, okay, we just got to make sure we get get the right power unit, you know, as part of that package. The engine for 19 was a step forward, and we were then able to really start to get the foundations in place for a championship challenge.
Statistically, obviously, RB18 has been our best car. It's a car I think we can be very proud of, in as much as we had a tight championship battle through 21, obviously. So we kept developing the car well into the season. And of course, when you have limited resources, then if you're putting research and development into that car, then that's research and development you're not putting into this brand new, very new car for the new regulations, which we knew were coming, obviously. So it's a difficult balancing act, but we focused on trying to get the fundamentals right, trying to get the package in the way that would, including suspension, front and rear suspension, the layout of the monocoque, the layout of the radiators and so forth, so that we would have a package that hopefully, even if it didn't start out as the quickest car, we could develop through the season. In the pre-season testing, we were a little bit worried before we got there. So we'd already done a little bit of research and knew roughly what we needed to do to improve it. So that when we put the Race 1 package on in Bahrain just before the race, then that catapulted us from definitely behind Ferrari to broadly level, let's say. The car definitely had some weaknesses in the first half of the season. We still had some weaknesses, of course, but we reduced those weaknesses, and certainly by the second half, then we had a fully competitive package.
Well, it was a very tough year, and when you look at the statistics, it looks like we totally, dominated. The first half of the season, Ferrari, they had their chances. They had probably a quicker package, but Max was outstanding throughout the year, but particularly in that first half.
The reduction in wind tunnel testing means we can therefore evaluate less different components, less different ideas. If we're really smart and always put on the right things on the model, then of course it doesn't make much difference. Ferrari won't be resting on, they will be kind of sorting out where their weak areas. They had a couple of reliability problems. They obviously made a couple of pit wall mistakes, so they'll be right back. And then, of course, you obviously saw Mercedes starting with a car that was quite a long way off the pace, and evolving it to the point they won the last race but won. So we know they will be right there. So it's going to be a tough year for sure.
Who would win in a race?
I tell you what, Adrian in the classics, he's a pretty mean driver. I mean, he's won some big races at Goodwood. I'm nowhere near as brave as he is. He's fearless.